So, hi everyone. Welcome to the next episode on the Mindful Conversationalist. And today I'm quite excited because I have a very special guest today called Jabari Smith, and he's from Louisiana. Hi, Jabari.
Hi, Marilyn. It's so good to see you. First time since our amazing experience in Cape Town.
Yes, it is.
Um,
I'm so happy to see you too. And just to let everyone know that Jabari and I met at the G20 Interfaith Forum in Cape Town with the youth program called, with the youth organization called A Common Word Among the Youth NPO, which is ACWAY. And so we'll talk a little bit more about ACWAY in our conversation as it unfolds. So yeah, Jabari was there. He did some inspiring conversation, some inspiring work, and I really wanted to have a meaningful conversation with him. So, Jabari, before we get into, G20, because I think everybody wants to know what happened there, what it was about, the behind the scenes of it. Let's get to know more about you, right? So, I would like to know, who is Jabari, and what is your journey like? How did it unfold? How did you get into the interfaith space, and how did you become involved with the ACWAY?
First of all, it is such a pleasure to be a guest on your podcast. I am so honored that we had such an organic and swift connection at the forum, and that we are already doing what Ackway encourages us to do, collaborating across cultures, um, enhancing opportunities for dialogue across faiths, creating opportunities that enhance dialogue across faiths. So we are already facilitating the mission of Ackway beyond our time at the forum. So that really means a lot to me that we can really get to the races, get out of the gate and do this work that we're also passionate about immediately. My name is, as you said, Jabari Smith. I am from New Orleans, Louisiana. I am a proud native of New Orleans. I always say that it is because I grew up in a city that is so rich in culture, heritage, and history that I grew to become this global citizen, which has allowed me to live on 6 of 7 continents around the world, live and work on 6 of 7 continents, and travel to countless countries, but most importantly, connect with people across cultures and faiths, identities and ideologies. And that is what truly inspires me to continue doing this work as a global citizen, as a motivational speaker, as a youth coach. And currently, I'm also the Associate Director of International Admissions at a private international all girls boarding school in the Berkshires of Massachusetts, which is close to the Boston area. I work with girls from all over the world, and it is so amazing to see that they are in an environment that champions them and encourages them to be their best selves, and even more importantly, their authentic selves. So this work is it's in me. It's not on me. It's in me, and I'm just so honored to be able to continue to do great work around the world. I lived in Japan for 2 years, which is where my journey started. I lived in Nairobi, Kenya for 4 years, where I had a travel and culture TV series called Jabari Inspires, which is also the name of my motivational speaking business. And most recently, I spent 3 years living in Latin America across Ecuador, which I'm actually flying to tomorrow for a wedding. So it's busy times, but I'm so grateful to be able to go back to support a good friend. I was in Ecuador and then Colombia and most recently Mexico City before relocating back to the US in July for this role at Miss Hall's school as their Associate Director of International Admissions. So the Cape Town opportunity and being able to re-engage with the Ackway network couldn't have come at a better time. And I feel so energized still by that experience. I'm sure you do as well. I've spoken about it probably every day since we left um, Cape Town. And I was really impacted by my time in South Africa. I truly was. Interestingly, the school I work at posted me on their Instagram yesterday, talking about my work in South Africa at the IF20 Forum. So you'll have to check that out. They put a little blurb about, ACWAY and the work that we do as a network. So I'm in a supportive community that honors the work that I've done even before my current role as their Associate Director of International Admissions.
Thank you. And tell me, you mentioned you work with like girls. What kind of work do you do? What it's all about?
So Miss Hall's school is an all-girls private boarding school. We work with girls from 23 countries and 12 states across the US. These girls are incredible. I mean, certainly they come in with an academic aptitude and um, you know, the test scores and all the things that are necessary to be deemed as, like students who are excelling. But beyond that, they come to our campus with a desire to immerse themselves in the wide range of activities and opportunities and internships and ultimately global connections that our school has to offer. As a member of the admissions team and being the associate director of international admissions, my role is traveling the world, recruiting students, talented, ambitious, and ultimately girls who are looking for an opportunity to advance themselves as leaders. Our mission at the school is, creating and empowering bold leaders and global citizens, which truly resonates with my journey as a global citizen. So I get to work with prospective students and families, encouraging them to select Miss Hall's school if they deem that it is a good match for them as a student, and of course for the families and parents if they feel it's a good match for their daughter.
That's great to hear. I mean, I love the whole fact that you're behind empowering and supporting women. So
Yes,
that's
yes,
great.
I
That's
love
great.
that.
So tell me, in the plenary, the opening plenary of the youth program, you reflected on your interfaith work in Japan, in Kenya, and how you supported marginalized communities. How did those experiences deepen your understanding of diversity beyond race? Could you maybe share a bit on that?
Absolutely. And I'll say that my initial understanding of diversity beyond race began when I was an undergraduate student at Howard University in DC, in Washington, DC. Howard University is a historically Black college and university. And while many people told me prior to going to Howard that going to a historically Black college or university would not be reflective of the broader real world, it in fact opened me up to a broader understanding of diversity because I was in a setting in which I did not have to consider myself as, a part of an affinity group, right? Like, or one of a few Black students on campus. I didn't need to seek out the Black student union or association. I was truly able to connect with people based on shared interest, values, skills, and passions. And so it was then that I began to see diversity as being so much greater than, one's race or one's nationality or one's religion, but ultimately, what are those inherent traits and characteristics that truly make us diverse? And with that being said, I felt inspired to explore the diversity of our global community after graduating from Howard, whose mission is leadership for America and the global community. So when I moved to Japan, was the only foreigner in my town and the first Black person to ever live there. Everywhere I went, I was 50 Cent or Will Smith or P. Diddy or Obama Sensei. And while that was very much race-based identification, because I was the only Black man in that community, what it taught me was that I had a significant role in my journey as a younger leader at that time, a younger global citizen, to educate and to create a sense of awareness so that we don't allow people to walk around with stereotypes or misperceived notions of what a people or a culture or a religion may be. My journey has really been fueled by my desire to have one-on-one connections that allow others, as well as myself, to have a firsthand perspective around a reality-based perspective around what one's experience may be, regardless of what their race, sexual orientation, nationality, or any of those like on paper identifiers may be.
That's quite interesting. Thank you for sharing on that. It's interesting to see how different cultures around the world have different perceptions about things. And that's true. We do have a responsibility if we caught up in a situation. So tell me, how did this eventually lead you to ACWAY? I mean, can you tell me a little bit how you got involved in that organization, how you came to know about them, and like a little bit of the history and background, like what does ACWAY do? Because I've never heard of ACWAY. For me, for the first time that I heard about ACWAY was being invited to the G20 Interfaith Forum on the youth program through Peacemakers Network, because I knew Jessica Rowland and Sarah Oliver from the United Religions Initiative. And so that's when I got to know about ACWAY, and I never knew your guys existed. So tell me a bit about this.
Now, I'm so happy that you asked that question, because that allows me to share a bit more about the journey of, understanding diversity and identity from a broader lens. So after Japan, I did move back to the US for a bit, and that's when I started my motivational speaking business. I could sense that there was this significant connection between inspiration and travel, and people being inspired by travel and the exploration of culture and identity. That motivated me to, want another international experience beyond the US. So I moved to Nairobi, Kenya, initially to study social entrepreneurship with the Amani Institute, which is a global social entrepreneurship focused organization that empowers social entrepreneurs with relevant 21st century skills. They launched in Kenya and have since scaled to Brazil and India. So I was in a 2-month program with them. I was a part of their flagship cohort, and 2 months evolved into 4 years. I ended up staying in Kenya for 4 years. I fell in love with the experience that I was having in Africa. For it to be my first experience on the continent, I felt like I was having the lies and the deceit and the betrayal of misinformation being pulled back. I was able to understand that what I'd been led to believe about Africa was in fact not true, if even a small part of the story. So, as an American in Kenya, I really got to explore my identity as a man of African descent a lot more. And even with that, I also encountered stereotypes, because people would often say, well, Jabari, you're not speaking how we imagine most Black Americans speak, or you're not dressing in the manner that we expect most Black Americans to dress. Why aren't your pants sagging? Why aren't you speaking like, what's up, dog? Just the very caricaturized stereotype of Black Americans that I think people often have when they don't have a firsthand perspective of the culture, or have yet to connect with someone from that culture. So it was an opportunity for me to almost, turn the mirror back around to the people who were presenting those stereotypes to me and say, well, as an African, where's your spear? Where's your lion? And I said that jokingly, because a lot of people in the US might have an archaic and stereotypical notion that everywhere in Africa is the bush, or everywhere in Africa is a block away from, a wildlife, conservation space, or, you'll see the big five roaming the streets, which is obviously not the case at all. So as I've grown in my journey, I have been able to challenge people's ideas about culture and ultimately debunk stereotypes. And not only helping others debunk stereotypes, but also having stereotypes that I've held about certain cultures or places debunked and demystified, which has been the most beautiful aspect of the journey. As much as I strive to teach, I'm also learning a lot. So it truly is a mutually beneficial experience. It was in Kenya that I discovered ACWAY, which was in 2015. This was the year that ACWAY launched. So I submitted an application to be a part of a new youth-focused organization that was all about intercultural and interfaith connection and sought to bring 100 young leaders from 72 countries together. We met for the first time in Rabat, Morocco in December of 2015. And when I say 100 young leaders from 72 countries, I mean, you can imagine the energy was so electric. I mean, you saw the, like those 10-year ACWAYers coming back together and just how much love there is between, that network and that group, that family. So for me, that was the first time that I was able to consider my work through an interfaith lens. Yes, I grew up, honoring my religion as a Christian. I went to Catholic schools all my life up until university. So I was always engaged in my faith. My faith was an integral part of my journey. However, I never considered myself someone who would lean into religion as a way to promote or amplify my work. But it was through ACWAY that I had the experience for the first time in my life of connecting with people from such a broad range of faiths, from non-believers to people from the Hindu faith, to people from the Baha'i faith. I had my eyes, widened by that experience. And since then, I have been more keenly aware of the impact of religion in culture and how necessary it is to connect with people from different faiths. What I realized was that growing up in New Orleans, where I was only exposed to religious diversity under the umbrella of Christianity, how dangerous that was. I grew up only knowing religious diversity in the realm of Catholic and Baptist, which are both Christian. And there was a lot of, kind of debate around which is better, which is more engaging, which is more fun, which one honors God the best. And if you're debating which religion honors God the best, then there's a problem there. And that was, again, under the context of one religion, Christianity, but different sects of Christianity. So not having much exposure to religious diversity, I feel can be dangerous. And as I reflect back on my childhood and my experiences pre-ACWAY or pre-traveling the world, I recognize that I was severely underexposed. So I give significant thanks to ACWAY for allowing me to broaden my lens on what it means to appreciate diversity.
Wow, that's quite a journey. Thank you for sharing on that. I mean, it's so interesting to understand how you got into the interfaith space. So tell me, ACWAY is 10 years old, am I right? In those 10 years, what have you all been up to? What have you all done? And how do you all support youth, or what youth programs do you all have?
So ACWAY is all about ACWAY, a common word among the youth, is all about empowering young leaders from varying cultures and faiths to be able to facilitate dialogue-focused initiatives that create a sense of harmony and coexistence across religions and cultures. So after each ACWAY forum, fellows are encouraged, if not mandated, to facilitate projects in their respective communities that allowed them to, again, further amplify that mission of ACWAY, which is to create a more harmonious and cohesive world in which people from varying faiths and backgrounds can coexist peacefully. There have been over 200 projects, if not more, facilitated by ACWAY fellows, and our fellows come from countries like South Africa, Ecuador, the United States, Russia. I mean, I think we're probably represented in 60% of countries worldwide. But what makes ACWAY really special is the commitment of the fellows. Yes, you will have people who join the network and are unable to carry out the work um, at a high and or consistent level. There have been times where I've had to step back from the work because of other personal and or professional responsibilities. However, it is a network for a reason because it is always something that you can come back to. It is not, if you don't do this year, you will never be a part of it again type of family. I was back in South Africa at my first ACWAY forum in 10 years. Not that I hadn't been invited to participate in other forums, but I was not able to attend. So again, being in South Africa was special because it was my first time in South Africa, first time back to Africa since leaving Kenya in 2017, and my first time reconnecting with the ACWAY family in person since 2017. I did engage in several virtual events with them throughout the pandemic, which re-engaged my participation in the movement, or furthered my participation in the movement. But yes, ACWAY is all about empowering young leaders to know that they have a voice to inspire change within their communities around intercultural and interfaith understanding and coexistence.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I mean, it's so great to know. I mean, like I've been in the interfaith space for like over 13 years now, and I've engaged with a lot of youth networks. But I think what's so beautiful about this is that even though it's different youth networks with the different fellows and community, they all share the same common goal, and that's wanting peace in this world, wanting more friendship, interfaith friendship and love, more community building. And it also comes down to empowering youth and supporting youth, but also it's wanting a different world to live in. And I think that's what's powerful, because each one may be doing like their own stuff, but at the end of the day, we come together to collaborate because, as you can see at the G20 Forum, United Religions Initiative, Peacemakers Network, and ACWAY came together. So that was just like very inspirational. So going into the G20 forum a bit, right? I could see a lot of preparation went in. And from listening to you guys, it was done in a short time. There was like this like kicked off in like a short space of time. Looking at our social media, you're drank so much coffee, so many engagements, and it was like, can you share some behind the scene moments with me so that, people can understand, putting a conference together, especially a youth conference, what goes in it, what it takes. There's a lot of hard work, commitment, sacrifices. And can you share a bit about the behind the scenes stuff?
Well, as you said, so much work went into pulling that off. And let's just speak about the ACWAY component of it. Shout out to Lilia. Shout out to the entire organizing committee. Again, comprised of mostly members who have been with the organization since 2015. And that's not to take anything away from the newer members of ACWAY who are on the organizing committee, because I'm so inspired by every single person on that committee, not only because of the work that they did to make our experience in Cape Town as successful as it was, but because of the work that they're doing outside of ACWAY that contributes and amplifies their passions and their dedication to interfaith and intercultural work. As you know, it all came together within a span of 6 weeks. I started my new job on July 1st thinking, okay, I'm settled, I'm in my new job, and I won't be traveling for work until October or late September. And then I get the invitation that, well, Lilia reaches out to me and says, Jabari, we want you to come to South Africa. We know you just started this new job, but we would love it if you could be there. And my immediate thought is like, duh, I'm going to make it happen. So I spoke to my team. Thankfully, I'm at a school, again, that values global citizenship and values intercultural exchange. So they were completely in favor and support of me taking the time off. In spite of having just started the job a few weeks prior, they wanted me to be in South Africa. And yes, so I know that there was a lot of advocacy from Lilia and the organizing committee. In fact, I believe that Lilia sat in countless meetings to advocate for ACWAY's participation in the G20 Forum to ensure that that youth voice, that youthful voice was represented. And as we both experienced, it was so necessary to have ACWAY as a part of that forum, and just the quality of youthful voices that were able to contribute to panels, to the larger main plenary sessions. And yeah, I would say that it all went well, but of course you never know all of the work that's going on behind the scenes. And as much as I was working with the organizing committee as the MC, I still don't know all the details. And even though the forum ended, now there's another set of, there's more work to be done to ensure that ACWAY continues to not only have a seat at that table, but how are we creating our own table so that we are not limited to convening as a group only within the context of a G20 forum or an IF20 forum? How can we as ACWAY continue to create space for ourselves while creating space for others who align and identify with this work that we're doing? So again, much respect to Lilia, Izzy, who made sure that South Africa had significant representation in the cohort of new fellows, which was so amazing for me. Marilyn, let me tell you how much I just felt so empowered and inspired by the connections with people in South Africa. I think that in the US, we have learned and or heard a lot about South African history. We hear about Nelson Mandela, we hear about apartheid, and the diversity of the country, but to see it and to experience it was something completely different. And that is what one of the bigger takeaways for me from my time at the G20 Forum was, wow, the diversity in South Africa is powerful. And again, not just racial diversity or ethnic diversity, but the religious diversity, meeting people, the Rastafari community, from the indigenous African spirituality community, from just the broad range of faiths that are represented in the country. It inspires me, it inspires me to think more deeply about my faith and how I carry that faith, and am a steward of that faith in my day-to-day life. So it's something I'm still thinking about, and I truly do have South Africa to thank for that.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear. I mean, living here in South Africa my whole life, we've come from a lot of turmoil of apartheid. And, when Nelson Mandela became the president, he had the choice of to forgive or not to forgive, because a lot of things were done to him, and we've learned the history of it, how they were treated. But also that was the turning point for the country. And with that came reconciliation. And that's what I appreciate about this country. We have the concept of Ubuntu, which was the actual theme of the G20, Ubuntu in action. And it reflects that, shared humanity and interconnectedness. And, living in a country like South Africa, we don't have much issues in terms of religion, right? Our thing was more about racial issues. We have poor service delivery. We have governmental issues. We have municipality issues. It's got to do with those kind of things. But when it came to religion and with the principles of Ubuntu, it's much more of a welcoming and interconnected country. And, speaking about Ubuntu, what did you learn from it, and what did it mean for you, experiencing it at the G20 Forum? Because if I look at ACWAY in the youth program, it gathered 55 youth from 25 countries and from 15 faiths, right? That is quite a thing to put together and bring those kind of youth together. So in the spirit of Ubuntu, what did it mean for you?
Even the numbers sound good. 25 countries, or 25 leaders, or 55 young leaders, 25 countries, and 15 faiths. It's special when you think about that. And, Ubuntu is a concept that I had been exposed to prior to the G20 Forum, but certainly was inspired and am still inspired to think more deeply about almost a month later, post South Africa and the G20 Forum. So I'll share that I talked a little bit about my time in Slovenia when I was leading a social inclusion project. And so I think it's interesting, we talk about the history of South Africa and that history of the exclusion of certain groups of people from opportunities, whether those be economic opportunities or educational opportunities. Well, the work I was doing in Slovenia in October and November of 2023 was also not too dissimilar from some of those challenges that South Africa has faced. In fact, these are challenges that many countries across the world, including my own, the United States, has had to grapple with. In Slovenia and across Europe, there are a community of people known as the Roma community. They may also be known more colloquially as gypsies, which could be seen as a derogatory term, but in many respects within that community is now seen as a term of empowerment. They have embraced that term. But the Gypsy Roma community is historically marginalized, and they have been historically excluded from education, from economic advancement. And so I went in as this lead facilitator to help civil society professionals develop strategies around better engagement with this community that in many respects exists on the periphery of society. They live in their own communities. They're hardly represented in school, likely not at all in government. And if so, it is at a 0.1% level. And going in and talking to the social workers. I led workshops focused on empathy and intercultural collaboration. So very much so similar to the work that we do with ACWAY, inspiring people to have meaningful dialogue across what would be seen as, kind of barriers, right? Like these social constructs that divide us. So in facilitating these workshops focused on empathy and dialogue and intercultural harmony with social workers in the community in Slovenia I was working in, the community is called Kočevje. I worked with social workers. I worked with educators. I even worked with industry workers, with hospitality industry workers who work in cafes or hotels or restaurants. And in those settings, they often come head to head with members of the Gypsy community. And there's a lot of tension there. So giving them strategies that help them navigate conflict and or challenging conversations across cultures. And at the culminating event of that month that I spent in Slovenia, again, empowering the community, empowering youth to understand that treating people as you desire to be treated is simple. But it wasn't such a simple concept for them because they had not really even thought of the fact that this group of Roma people, the Gypsies, were being excluded. So it was very interesting for me because you imagine, oh, everybody kind of looks at life through the lens of we want to treat others the way we want to be treated. But for some people, that's a very new concept to consider. And when they are inspired or encouraged to consider it, it does invoke a sort of aha moment. I had two friends from Slovenia who were participants in one of my workshops call me the day after a workshop and say, Jabari, we get it now. We were walking through a park. We saw a group of Roma guys, and our immediate reaction, as it is typically, was to walk the other way to avoid them. But we thought to ourselves, well, what would Jabari do? Instead of walking away from those guys, what if we just went up to them and said hi? Which they did. And the guys said hi back. And it was a positive exchange. And it was as simple as that, considering how someone else might feel if you were to walk the other way when you saw them coming, or considering how they might feel if you say hello as you are approaching them. And ultimately, one action could create a negative feeling and one action could create a positive feeling. At the culminating event, one of my team members, who was a gentleman from Mali, who's been living in Slovenia since the late 70s. He speaks fluent Slovenian. He's in his 60s, and he's an international human rights activist for Slovenia. He presented the concept of Ubuntu to the 400 high school students in the town that we were facilitating our final event for. And that was the first time that I'd actually considered Ubuntu in the context of my work. And he presented Ubuntu in Slovenian to the group of Slovenian high school students to inspire them to think about how, yes, Jabari is a man of African descent from New Orleans. He is a man of African descent from Mali. The group of students we were speaking to, may not be of African descent, but nonetheless, all of us, are a part of curating a positive experience for each other based on how we treat one another. And that was really powerful for me. And so for it to be the theme of the South Africa forum was full circle. And I wasn't able to share this at the forum that Ubuntu was present during my time in Slovenia. But it's interesting how you will have life experiences that will continue to be so relevant, because Slovenia for me was a significant project. I call it a Super Bowl moment in my career because of the impact I was able to have in a community that, again, I didn't know much about Slovenia prior to going. I didn't know much about the Roma community or the plight of the quote unquote gypsies. But I walked away from that experience feeling so empowered, and also challenged, knowing that we exist in a world in which there are so many communities that are experiencing exclusion. And oftentimes, if it's not impacting you in your part of the world or even in your specific community or vicinity, either you don't know or you don't care. So we have a lot of work to do in this world. And through that concept of Ubuntu, we can hopefully inspire people to care about those who they see as being different and or very far removed from their day-to-day experiences.
Wow, thank you for sharing on that. You may think that Ubuntu is a South African concept, but it's not actually. It's a universal concept, right? And I think, it comes back to our humanity, before we connect beyond our religion or our race or our whatever we are, identity or personality, we have to connect to our humanity first, because through our humanity we find that connection of love, the connection of just being a good human being towards each other. So I think that's a very powerful story what you shared in terms of how perceptions and perspectives need to change in order for us to have more peaceful communities. And it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that takes over time, and it's hard work and it's challenging work as well. Just touching on Ubuntu, at your experience in the conference, how did you feel Ubuntu came across? Because for me, it was that actual moment when we did that service program, where all of us got together and we put on our red caps,
Yes.
and it was just an amazing experience. And I'll tell you why for me, because, we talk so much, right? We talk about ideologies, concept of serving communities, of leadership, of doing what we want to do, but it only really has value when it turns into action, right? And so for me, it was like that was such a powerful statement and moment, and I haven't experienced that in any other conference, which made it so unique, this conference, because it was us coming together. It didn't matter which religious leader it was, what your title was, what your position was, what your faith was, and what you were. It was beyond all these borders, and it transcended also the ego and the personalities, because we were all there in a common goal, which was to pack 33,000 meals, to
Yes.
serve and to give it to underprivileged children in Western Cape. And it was done in 2.5 hours. I mean, imagine 33,000 meals in 2.5 hours. That was
Right.
amazing for me.
It
And
was
the
amazing.
energy was so amazing. Everybody was together like one big family serving, and I loved it. So, what was your experience for you in Ubuntu at the conference?
Oh, such a powerful question. And I'm so glad you shared what your moment was, or, what one of those highlights for you from the conference was. My moment was when the rabbi from Jerusalem and the imam from Washington, D.C. came together to formally launch the Jewish Muslim religious fraternity at the forum. That was such a powerful moment for me. I interacted with both of those gentlemen separately prior to their presentation in the main forum hall. And my interaction with both of them individually was so positive. I remember walking away from both of those interactions, which happened, you know, very distinctly and separately, feeling a sense of I want them to mentor me. Like from Imam Talib from DC, I felt like, wow, like his wife is from New Orleans, by the way. So, and then I went to university in Washington, DC. So there was this sense of familiarity, almost like an uncle that I was reconnecting with. And I even told him, I was like, wow, you're like a soul brother. I just felt such a strong connection to him. And then the Imam from Jerusalem, wow, I mean, his spirit and his energy just felt so pure. Interacting with him felt like I was in a state of healing simply through, a state of osmosis, of absorbing his energy. So seeing both of them, two men that I'd already gathered such motivation and inspiration from and had great respect for off of limited interaction, seeing them come together to create a fraternity that honors intercultural connection and collaboration through conflict across these borders, right, that have been erected to make us see each other as enemies. That was powerful for me. And as a Christian man who is, not connected to the Jewish and or a Muslim faith, I felt like, wow, like as much as this isn't necessarily associated with my faith, I want to be a part of it. And for me, that's Ubuntu. It's seeing myself as being innately connected to something that may not be a part of my identity, or it's being able to be inspired by something that may not directly impact me, but ultimately does directly impact me. Because if we can create a more harmonious, collaborative connection between the Muslim and Jewish faiths, then that creates positive waves for all of us in this interfaith world. And even if you don't do work within the interfaith space, it just creates a more harmonious, more peaceful world. So those gentlemen and that moment was a highlight for me, and I've felt that since their presentation at the forum.
That's also a very powerful example as well. And I do agree with you. It does impact us because there's a lot of South Africans I know that are affected by the Palestine and Israel and Gaza, what's happening. It may be another country, but it affects all of us because it's somehow connected either to our faith or to our humanity. Nobody wants to see people suffering. Nobody wants to see war. Nobody wants to see all these things. So I think that's a very beautiful and powerful example as well that you shared. So yeah, thank you for sharing on that.
Wow.
And tell me, So the other thing that came out of the conference, right, was the lack of representation of women and youth, and we spoke a little bit about this earlier. And I found that also interesting because, people stood up. There was one of the youth, Grace, right? She stood up and spoke up about it. There were a few other women in the main plenary sessions that brought it out, and they were like, because there was a panel, they were just only male, and it was mostly senior men, and people were like, where's the inclusivity of things of women
Right.
and youth? So if you're going to talk about communities and about peace building, you can't leave them out of the conversations. And so what I find interesting was that there were these grievances and people spoke about it, and immediately action was taken. Usually action is never taken, and overnight everything was switched around and changed. I had like overnight been contacted to present on a panel about advocacy and theology and climate change, and I was like, I wasn't even considered, and all of a sudden overnight I have to like just prepare and be there to
Right.
present. But for me it was like, wow, that happens so fast. These things don't happen so fast. So it was very positive for me. And even I was talking to one of the youth from ACWAY, the organizers, and she was telling me that at the previous G20, there was no youth representation. So this is really positive. At this G20, there is youth representation. And, ACWAY had fought hard to be in this space, so there wasn't that integration before. So what are your thoughts around this? I mean, do you see it as like, this is a defining moment in shaping inclusivity in these forums and conferences?
Absolutely. It was great to see, and I think also having an understanding of what was going on behind the scenes to ensure that we had that representation and that the forum did present a sense of inclusivity to participants, because everybody wants to see themselves represented in some way, on stage or in panels, especially as it relates to such important issues and conversations. I think that there will be no denying the impact and the importance of the youth voice in IF20 and G20 forums going forward. That is my hope. That is my belief. I believe that ACWAY brought a critical perspective to the table, and beyond perspective, we brought an inspired level of energy to that forum. I yielded so many questions from people curious to know about ACWAY, wanting to be connected to ACWAY. I literally have messages that I have yet to respond to from people I met in South Africa and beyond, but particularly local South African contexts who were very much interested and intrigued by this concept of youth engagement in spaces such as ACWAY, which contribute to the development and creation, the development and nurturing of policies and programming that ultimately, shape our current and future world. So I believe that this was, as the 10th year of ACWAY, a turning point for the organization, a positive turning point. And I for sure see us continuing to be recognized as integral voices that need to be at the table. And the beautiful thing is, I think that for all of the new participants to ACWAY, they felt inspired. I mean, you've seen all the messages that have come through the groups. I love that this current cohort of ACWAY fellows seems to be one of the most engaged and energized newer cohorts in recent years. And I think that has so much to do with the fact that we were represented significantly at this conference, and we were able to support each other and champion each other and learn from each other. I think when you see your peers on the big stage, it allows you to think more deeply about what you can do or what you should be doing to raise your voice around causes and issues that are important, not only to you personally, but are important to the broader interfaith movement.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, it was very inspiring. I mean, the first day, the youth session, it was just completely inspiring. For me, it was
Yes.
yeah, it put more zest into my work again, but also, when you're working in like the interfaith space and you're not constantly connected to your networks, but partially, it becomes a bit a lonely space sometimes. And
Absolutely.
so when you reconnect beyond online engagements in the physical sense, it just brings so much more positivity and more interaction and more engagements and more inspiration. Because you look at the online space and you look at the world today, negativity sells,
Mm.
conflict sells. It's like it's a very despondent place to be in. But when I connected with the youth and the energy they brought, the positivity, the inspiration, it was like, yes, I'm in the right space with the right people, the right association. you know
Absolutely. Mm.
these are my people, they get me.
These are
you
my
know
people. And that was one of my bigger like reminders, takeaways, affirmations. Like, these are my people. These are the spaces that I feel most alive in, that I feel most energized in, diverse spaces in which I'm able to connect with people across a broad range of identities and intersectionalities in their identities and faiths and cultures and orientations and whatever it may be. I love the opportunity to learn from people. And ACWAY is such a powerful platform to facilitate that type of learning, that interpersonal learning. And it again, it gives us so much life, right, and energy. And that's why I've been connected to the network for 10 years, because I see the work that my peers who started 10 years ago have done. I see the work that people who I haven't even met in person in the ACWAY network are doing. It was even powerful to meet people like Raquel, who I've been connected to virtually since 2017, or Sarah, who I'd been connected to virtually since about the same time. Meeting them in person after years of virtual connection and seeing them do their thing and share their teachings with the group was very inspirational. So I plan to be connected to ACWAY for the long haul, because there's just so much to gain and so much to contribute to the network.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Because, I mean, Jessica and I have been engaged in the online space since COVID, 2020, and we've never met in person. So in Cape Town was
Nice.
the first time we met. And I was like,
So cool.
wow, it's so great to meet you. Even though she's been on my podcast channel, we've had a conversation, but it's not the same, until you
Different.
meet people in person. Um, so tell me, the ACWAY Youth Program was very exciting. There was a lot that was done, from interfaith dialogues to conflict resolution to, trainings or workshops on climate change to social media to the Charter of Compassion. It was very, for me, empowering program. It wasn't there just to, only talk or reflect, but it was also to take something away to empower you educational wise. And I like what you said. It's about learning. And that's what I love about these spaces, to learn. Um, for you, tell me, what do you think, like, what tools, strategies, or learning stood out in the ACWAY program for you? For me, it was the Charter of Compassion program, because it was talking about leadership and how to move beyond a dictator leadership to servant leadership, but also to have that compassion. And it's not just for humans, but creatures and the whole of the earth, right? So that was profound for me. And also the Interfaith Dialogue program that we had with Imran. I think that was also very inspiring, because I've never engaged in a workshop like that before. And for me, it was like, wow, it made me look at religion differently, looked at concepts differently, look at, ideologies differently. And I'm going to have him on my podcast channel one of the days, I don't know when, because I just think he has so much to share and give and offer as well in order for people to learn. So for you specifically, what stood out for you?
I'm so happy that you mentioned Imran. I missed that session, regrettably, but in spite of missing it, it still stands out to me as one of the highlights of the program, based on the feedback that others had for him and the session, and also based on what I read and saw and absorbed post, in the feedback post that session. And what I gathered was that people crave safe spaces. And oftentimes, with our religious identities, we don't often feel that we can walk into spaces showcasing our full identity, and feel safe. And so for me, it was really the conversations that I had with fellows, learning about their individual experiences, learning about the intersectionalities of their identities across nationality and race and religion, and how oftentimes with that gumbo of identities, one does not often feel that they are able to comfortably navigate this world, in kind of like full bloom, with their identities in full bloom. They have to compartmentalize. So today in this space, I will only be this much of a Christian. In this space, I will only be this much of an American or a South African, or whatever it is. So the concept of like safe spaces really stood out to me, because what I sense is that people are really craving opportunities to be themselves, to have open dialogue, and to ultimately not feel like they're going to be judged for being who they are. And my contribution to that was, those one-on-one conversations that I was able to have with people, because hopefully those conversations allowed people to feel from me that they were being seen, heard, and valued. And, that was so much of the energy that I received from fellow participants, that feeling of I'm being seen, I'm being heard, and whatever unique perspective I have to offer is also being valued. And I truly hope that all ACWAY fellows walked away with that feeling, because that is what we strive to create, a sense of value in the voice and in the work of all of our participants.
Yeah, I think that is powerful what you say about the safe space. It's very important, especially in interfaith work and in peace building. If you do not have that safe space, you can't allow for transformation to happen, whether it's happening on an individual level or a community level. And that's where forgiveness come in, or reconciliation. But it has to start from that safe space. So I think that's very important what you highlighted. And, speaking about the plenaries, which other plenary stood out for you in terms of engagements? Because, like for me, we talk about this conference. We don't want it to be another talk shop. We want to shift from dialogue into action. We want to collaborate. We want to partner up, re-strategize, get inspired, continue our peacemaking journey. And so we just don't want talk shops, right? So for you, which other plenary stood out for you? Like for me, it was about, the artificial intelligence and the ethics around it. It was also about the intergenerational plenary, which came at the end, unfortunately. I wish it was at the beginning, because it felt like an afterthought. It should have been at the beginning with a more inclusive approach. Yeah. But I thought that was a very wonderful plenary, because there was an intergenerational conversation with a youth and a senior. And it was a fruitful engagement that should have happened at the beginning. But so, like, how do we move away from this talk shop into tangible action, taking away from this G20 forum?
The plenary that stood out to me most, the session that stood out to me most, was the human sex trafficking session. I was not initially planning to attend that session, perhaps thinking that it was beyond my realm of like understanding, and maybe not specific to the work that I focus on. But Hira, one of our ACWAY fellows and a member of the organizing committee, was a panelist, and I wanted to support her. So I went into the session not knowing what to expect, and walked away feeling absolutely touched and touched and saddened, quite frankly, by the reality of people who are impacted by human sex trafficking's experiences. I was also, it's like I'm trying to use the right words because it was such a heavy session. And I want to be sure that I describe my feelings adequately. I think I was horrified, quite frankly, by the work that people who are advocates for victims of sex abuse and sex trafficking, the experiences that they have to live with. So it was a reminder that there are challenges in this world that are being addressed by people who are doing the good work, right? They are doing the good work. And while that work may not be in my realm, I should be educated on human rights abuse. And those that it impacts, whether that be women and youth or men or religious minorities or those who have been historically excluded because of their race and ethnicity. It was a reminder that there's a lot more to learn and that there's a lot more to do. And that was the session that I went back to my team at Miss Hall's school and shared, because I feel like, wow, like while we may not actively engage with this work on a daily basis, it may not be what we are ultimately called to do professionally. It is so important for us to be aware and be knowledgeable and to understand that people are suffering at the hands of others. And whatever we can do to contribute to mitigating that, whether it be being more vigilant when we're traveling or in our day-to-day lives, because this stuff is happening right under our noses. And if you are not aware of the ordeal, you may not be able to identify signs of trouble when they're right in front of your face. So it was a wake-up call to me, and a reminder that I should not passively engage with matters such as human sex trafficking. I should be conscious and more aware of how I can contribute to those issues or mitigating those issues.
Yeah, thank you for sharing on that. Yeah, that's quite it's quite a sensitive and a challenging topic as well. Yeah, and that's why I stuck to the AI one, the ones where I felt like I wanted to know how are we moving towards in
Absolutely.
society in terms of ethics, because it's getting out of control at the moment in terms of the online space, but it's going to challenge us and it's going to impact us. And how do we respond to that in terms of peace and security as well? So I think thank you, Jabari, for this conversation. I mean, we covered so much. We can go on talking. I mean,
We can
there's
go
lots of,
on. We need a part two. Can we have a part two?
yeah, we need a part two. There's a lot to unpack that happened at G20. It might have been just like 5 days of our life, but there was a lot that happened in that 5 days.
I feel
Besides
like
yeah, yeah, there was a lot.
it was a lot. I feel like I still haven't properly unpacked everything. I haven't properly reflected on everything because when I got back, I was in the office the very next day, back to work, and I didn't have a lot of time to like follow up on all of my contacts, which I still need to do. I mean, I met so many amazing people doing so much great work in South Africa and beyond that I desire to stay connected to and contribute to, their missions. For example, working with you and being a guest on your podcast. Thank you again. It is an honor. And I hope that this is only the first of many collaborations for us, Marilyn. I value our connection. I love the work you're doing and your passion for it. It motivates me. So thank you for following up on this and making sure we were able to squeeze it in. I'm in between work travels. I was traveling all week in Connecticut, and now I'm going to Ecuador for a wedding. So I'm so happy that we could make this happen because
I'm so happy as well. I'm so happy you could be here despite, our busyness of life. But I think it's important to have these conversations. It's important for people to know and to also experience a bit of it, because not everybody can be in that space, but we
Right.
can bring that space to others to understand, and it impacts and inspires in a positive way. But yeah, as we said, there's a lot to unpack. And yeah, I'm still trying to make a video of my experience, which will come out soon, which I haven't yet done because it's just a lot to unpack.
So
So
much happening, yes.
yeah, so at least I can start off with this podcast and then, so guys, watch out for my video. It will be posted on my social media accounts. But I want to just thank you, Jabari, and honor you for the work that you do and for the inspiration you bring and for being a positive youth leader out there, which is so needed in today's world. And just to end off with the last question to ask you, what is your personal vision for interfaith leadership, and how do you hope young leaders like yourself to shape the future of peace building? So I want to end up on a positive note of your
Yes,
thoughts to all
absolutely.
those listening to us. Yeah.
Well, I will say that my hope is that more people who don't see themselves as interfaith leaders, but have a sense of curiosity and interest in working with people across cultural and ethnic lines, will be inspired to engage in this work. I think we need to demystify the interfaith sphere because most people don't understand what it means, and that's become quite apparent to me as I've shared my experiences with ACWAY and at the Interfaith Forum. I truly believe that there are a lot of people in the world who would be able to contribute greatly to this mission if there was a greater sense of clarity around how they can contribute to it and what it actually means to be an interfaith leader. I truly think that a lot of people assume that if they are not a leader within their church or their synagogue or their mosque or their religious temple, that maybe they're not an interfaith leader, or that if they're not a devout Christian or an Orthodox Jew or someone who is, like the ultimate dedicated servant to their faith, that this space may not be for them. But what I've come to find is that this space helps you crystallize the type of interfaith work you want to specialize. And it also helps you understand that there are so many ways to show up in this work. It is not necessarily that you have to be a Bible thumping interfaith leader or that you have to be able to quote the Quran in its entirety. I think being an interfaith leader is all about having a sense of curiosity around the kaleidoscope of our world, like the dynamics of our world. And if you're interested in culture, then that's a great start. If you're interested in knowing about people who have had different life experiences from you, then that's a great start. You don't even have to start from the base of religion because truthfully, I didn't. I started from just this wide eyed curiosity about culture. And then through that was able to see, wow, there is no culture without faith. And I would not be as curious about culture or as confident in my journey exploring the world in search of connection with people from different cultures if it wasn't for my faith. My faith fuels my work and it fuels my confidence in this work and my optimism for the world and what we can do to make this world a better place. So I'd like to end my remarks by saying that the best is yet to come. And I truly believe that the best is yet to come.
Thank you so much. That's absolutely beautiful. And I agree with you. Being in the interfaith space is not just about religion, and it's connecting to your faith. And for your faith that comes from your heart space, the love that you have for humanity, wanting to do, actions for the welfare of humanity. And that goes beyond religion, it's connecting to the heart space and humanity first. So thank you so much. Thank you for this conversation. It was beautiful. It was insightful, and I appreciate your time. Thank
Oh,
you, Jabari.
absolutely, Marilyn. Anytime. Part two coming soon. And I look forward to staying in touch. So
Same here.
sending love and positive energy from the Berkshires in Massachusetts.
Same here. Sending you love, positive energy, and Ubuntu as well from South Africa.
Ubuntu, yes. Talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.